Welcome to Make More Marbles. My name is Brad Hart, and we're here to interview the game changers, the future makers, the co-collaborators and creators who are here to collaborate with one another towards a better future for all of us. Enjoy the show. We've got a great guest coming up for you right now. Welcome to Make More Marbles. I am Brad Hart. I'm here with Ayla Schlosser. Oh my God, I'm so excited. We tried to do this interview like a few weeks ago and we didn't have, the internet wasn't working, and now it's here and I'm excited. So welcome.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here.
Absolutely. So let's dive into where we were before. You started telling the story about where you've come from, your heroine's journey, if you will, and where you're at today. So let's get people at home caught up with the wonderfulness that is you. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start a little bit, I guess, with sort of why I do what I do at Resonate. And at Resonate, we're unlocking leadership potential of women and girls in East Africa. But I often say that I am the problem that I'm trying to solve in the world, because even as a young girl growing up in Northern California with a feminist mother and in an enabling environment, as a woman in my lifetime, I still found myself in situations that um, a lot of women are fearful of and face, and nobody wants to find themselves in. So I ended up in an abusive relationship in college, and I was really lucky that I had the support network and the strength and the resources to get myself out of it. But I didn't even admit to myself or to anyone else what had happened until years later. And it was through discovering the storytelling for leadership framework, which is rooted in community organizing and is a leadership development framework that was used in the farm workers movement and the civil rights movement, and then more recently in the Obama campaigns. And through going through the storytelling for leadership framework, I learned the difference between standing up for an idea, which it turns out I was really good at, and standing up for myself, which I was pretty bad at. And when I had that realization, it helped me understand that there was a lot more possible for me in my life and opportunity, and what I deserved and what I was worth. But I had to learn to think about and talk about myself in a different way. And that is true for women all over the world. And so I'd learned these community organizing skills in Washington, D.C., and it was 2012, and there were a bunch of other people who had the same skill sets as me coming off the Obama campaign, also living in D.C., and I said, if I faced these challenges growing up here, they're just as bad, if not worse, other places in the world. And I started looking for an organization that was using the storytelling for leadership approach to work with women and girls in the developing world, and I didn't find one. So I was 25 and I did a crowdfunding campaign, and I found a partner organization that was willing to work with me in Rwanda, which is an incredible place for women's leadership, where there's a huge percentage, more than half of parliament is female, but then at a local level, only about 7% of leadership roles are filled by women. So there's this huge gap that exists. And I wanted to see, if we apply this confidence building framework, can we close that gap? And so I moved there to pilot it, met my Rwandan co-founder, originally just moved there for 6 months to try it out. And this month will actually be 4 years that I've been there.
Wow. And when you're living overseas, where do you live exactly? So you're in Rwanda or?
Yeah, I'm in the capital city of Kigali.
Kigali, got it. So I was going to say this last time before we got cut off, but I have a very dear friend I've known for many years that lives in Democratic Republic of Congo, and she runs a movement, an organizational movement. It's like she has this very similar story to you, where she was working on Capitol Hill as a lobbyist and kind of, doing the thing there, and realizing that only about 2% of the money that was going towards programs to rehabilitate war-torn communities were going to things that actually worked, like investing in the women who rebuild the community, and then the men chill out and the war stop happening. So she started with the Resolve Network, and she's been doing a lot of really great work there, and she lives in Goma. I'm wondering if you've heard of them.
I've met her in Goma.
Oh, you know Vidya. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. So
it's such a small world, and
it really, really,
we
truly is
connected.
Yeah. So I just figured you guys had to have bumped into each other at some point. That's awesome. So that's wonderful. And then my other thought was there's a woman named Lila Jana, who just put out a book called Give Work. And she kind of takes a
Mm,
different tact, is giving work to underserved communities in Africa. And she's just
cool.
got a great book out. And I'm a huge fan of Lila. We actually went to Kenya together. It was Tim Ferriss, Charlie Hone, myself, and then the whole Salmon Source crew went to Kenya to tour the Serengeti and to see all the different work that they were doing out there. So that was really wonderful. But there's this piece of this, that you're taking forward, is like you're using the key core human operating system or program, which is the story.
Mm-hmm.
And you're doing it in such a way as to empower women who, I believe, I met Sarah Blakely at the beginning of this year. I think it was in February in Atlanta at Spanx headquarters. And she said something that hit me right between the eyes. She's like, female entrepreneurs are the most underutilized resource on the planet right now.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, you're right. And what can I do to help? So since then, I've aligned my mission a little bit differently. And I've been thinking like about this problem. And this is just a really long way to answer the question, is like, what do you see as being the most impactful way to take the tools that you have, whether it be, the storytelling aspects or the on the ground, kind of action that you're doing, and get that into the hands of more people, ideally women entrepreneurs, because I really feel
Yeah.
like they could kick butt. Or they
Yeah.
should and will continue to.
Yeah, I mean, evidence so far has proven that they will. So, yeah, no, it's actually that's such an interesting question, and the way that we work is totally through partnership. So we believe that having the mindset and the confidence to go out and make change is totally important. It's necessary, but it's way more impactful when that's coupled with specific, hard skills and knowledge. So we're partnering with groups that are teaching entrepreneurship or teaching job skills or teaching vocational or professional readiness. And then they give the professional skills, and then we come in and integrate the leadership training. And, our biggest question throughout the process, especially now that we've gotten some really great statistics backs that show that a 3-day training can result in increased income, increased self-efficacy, taking on different leadership roles in communities, of like, how do we get this to more people? And the thing about the storytelling model is exactly what you said, right? It is fundamentally human, but we've found that it needs to be delivered human to human and in a room with other humans. So, like, the incredible moment in the workshop is when we have women go through this process where they redefine leadership, they begin to understand their values, they tell a story of a challenge that they faced, how they overcame it, and how it's led them to where they are today. And there's this moment where they hear other women sharing their stories, where you sort of watch their eyes light up and they're like, wow, that woman is so amazing, she's so inspiring, she's such a leader. And then, wait, hold on, she's just like me.
Mm,
That's where that mindset shift happens. So that can't happen if you're just sort of doing a MOOC. So it presents us with this really tough challenge of, how do we get people physically in the room together, but do it in a scalable way? And so
yes.
we are looking now, and what we're piloting for our model for scale is a training of facilitators model. We're really trying to figure out on the spectrum between, with scale at one end and control at the other end, how far can we get? How much can we give up direct delivery? How much can we give up direct control without losing the impact? And we're sort of testing the boundaries of that right now with, one where we just give people curriculum, one where we give them curriculum and a bunch of training, one where they give them training videos, and how exactly can we make it easy as possible for someone to take this up in a big organization like, CARE, to, for example, say, we're going to adopt this into our training model. How can we make that easy for them while also making sure that we're maintaining the integrity of the curriculum and, most importantly, the impact?
Oh my God, I got so many people to connect you with, but I'll put
Oh,
that
I
for
can't
another conversation.
wait.
But okay, so what we need, or what I perceive that we need, my hallucination is we need a way to scale this, keep it high integrity, high touch, which is again what we're trying to do as well. Like, we could put out online courses day after day after day, and we
Hmm.
put out a lot of video content, a lot of content like that. But where it misses is like it's not personalized.
Right.
And one of the things I've learned after 10 years of working on this problem is that just use wealth as a kind of a metric for this. Every wealth creation strategy is a little bit different. Like, have you ever had a really successful mentor or somebody that has done some amazing things in their life, and they give you really great advice? You're like, that sounds awesome, I'm going to go do that. And you try to implement that advice yourself. It doesn't work for you because you don't have the same strengths or connections that
Yeah.
that person does. And like, how do we hack that problem additionally? So like the personalization aspect, the human to human aspect, because you really need to be there to get the story.
Yeah.
It doesn't quite translate through a computer screen or your phone. So these
And
are like
the
the problems that I
computer
see
can be
that
a
you're
great platform, right?
sure.
Like
It's
such a good
connected
platform.
us. We're here now.
Yeah.
And I can see you and hear you and interact with you, and the internet's strong, and I'm so grateful. I mean, this is a
Totally.
beautiful, amazing world that we live in, and it blows my mind. It's only going to get better. But like, is the next step VR, or is the next step some new
Mhm.
augmented reality, or that we can now interact with each other in a way that our brains can have the same warm fuzzies, that vibrational quality. The same reason I don't use dating apps, because you can't get the
Right.
vibes through pictures, right? That we have as humans when we're actually physically in each other's presence.
Or is the next step that that enables us to meet other humans in a different way, right?
Mm.
So that's the part that I think is powerful, and where I see potentially technology being a really important component of our work in the future is, can we create something that can be distributed via technology, but that requires a bringing together of people in person after that? So I don't know, that's something I've been thinking about.
Yeah, like get you up to speed for the ultimate meetup. Like we did that with
Right.
China. I wanted to learn about Amazon. I go to a guy who's been doing really well on it. I'm like, I want to hire you to be my mentor in Amazon. He said, sure, it's this much money. I'm like, or there's so many people that want to, and I have no problem investing in mentorship, but I'm like thinking like, how can we make this serve me at my strengths, which is like, I don't ask all the smartest questions ever, like I'm not the only smart guy in the room. How do you get a lot of smart people in the room and make this
Yeah.
really fun and then defray the costs of actually going to China and learning about all this? So in 2 weeks, I raised 35 grand. We went to China and had our whole trip paid for, and we had a really fun time. And 52 people got to be a part of that experience, where we had the training happening before they hit the ground. So, when you go to China, it's an ordeal, right? Your whole body gets screwed up. So when you get there, you're 100% trained and you know exactly what to do. And then we just kind of, personalize it a little bit while you're there. But all the
Totally.
hard work's been done. So maybe it's like a hybrid model between the online course model, get caught up, get up to speed, and you come to the meeting of the minds. Amazon's actually really good at this. When they have meetings, they have a brief and it's 6 pages long and everybody has to read the brief. So the
Hmm.
first 10 or 20 minutes of the meeting is literally just everybody reading the brief, and then everybody's on the same page, and therefore the meeting can begin.
Hmm. Fascinating. Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like we've come, so the model that we use comes from community organizing. And in so many ways, we've moved very far away from that, and how we've had to adapt it, right? So, community organizing is meant to empower communities to make national scale change, and we've really sort of our idea of sort of shrink the change is take that same framework and give it to individuals so that they can make community level change. But in essence, a lot of it's really the same. And I think some of my friends in the political organizing world are some of the best that exist in that sort of online to offline transition. But it's a whole different world when you're thinking about occasional access to internet and feature phones. And like definitely in the next 10, 15 years, we're not going to have that barrier in most parts of East Africa, but right now it still exists. And so it's a really interesting, how do you both deal with the current reality, but also plan for the future and make sure that you're capitalizing on that change when it does happen.
There's the business you're in and the business you need to be in. When I see, a lot of organizations, Richard Branson is doing it, Facebook's doing it, Google's doing it, that are trying to blanket the world in internet, and that's going to happen. And I'm
Yeah.
almost like a little sad, because there's still parts of the world that exist today where this thing doesn't work, and I'm super happy when it doesn't
Yeah.
sometimes, because the amount of incoming now is exponential,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
amount of real human connection. I just watched Lady Gaga's documentary 5'2", and there's a part in it where she says, people touch me and want to be around me all day, and then at night I go home and then cry.
Go.
And I'm like, if Lady Gaga's lonely, what the hell is happening? Right? Like somebody who's so beloved by so many millions of people, she tweets and 18 million people read it or whatever. It's like, what? How do we get this wrong? How is
Yeah.
social media so asocial or antisocial?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so,
and I
what are the
think that's
hybrid models that allow this to
right.
exist and be? I don't know. I'm rambling now. Please go ahead.
I just, I think that's one of the things that's so interesting, and this is somewhat of a digression as well, but we'll just roll with it. Like I grew up, and there were definitely mean girls, but like at least they couldn't tweet at me, you know. And I went to a women's college, and I was like sort of terrified because I was scared of groups of girls. I was like mortally terrified of groups of girls, and then went to this women's college and like realized that there is a different model in which, rather than picking at each other. Women pick each other up. And what a different and refreshing perspective. And I think that's something that, we've really seen in our workshops, is that outside of the content, just being in a room of other people who are supporting you, I mean, being believed in is one of the most powerful feelings in the world. And so if we can create environments where people feel that way, sometimes you can't believe in yourself until you know that someone else believes in you.
I love that. Being believed in is one of those powerful feelings. And it kind of is the opposite of your human fears, right? It's like our fear is that we will not be enough, or we won't be loved, or we won't belong, like all these
Mhm.
little pieces. But when somebody believes in you and your potential, they see more than what you are, that can open up your whole life. I mean, who hasn't had somebody in their life that saw more in them than they saw in themselves?
Mhm.
And we see so many stories that changes people's lives.
It's also terrifying, right? Like, I think as an entrepreneur, one of the things that people say that I feel most uncomfortable with is like, "Well, I'm investing in you," you know? And I'm like, "Oh man, that's a lot of pressure."
You sure you don't
Like,
want to invest in my company, which is over here? It's got to be in me.
yeah, like, but this idea is really good. Have you seen our results? Um, and it's both terrifying and motivating. On the one hand, it's like, I've got my healthy dose of imposter syndrome, and I think like, oh, you've made a mistake. Like, I don't know anything.
You found me out.
Yeah. And then I also think like, well, I guess I better live up to it then.
Yeah. And it's eustress versus distress, right? Distress
Right.
causes cortisol and, oh my God, everything is death and fear and flight and freeze and all that. But then eustress is this other type of stress, which is like that impetus to move forward, right?
Hmm.
The positive channel or current or flow that allows you to really grow into the person that ultimately, like I always look at it like we have these desires, right? We're inspired, right? And we move towards this thing, and in order to get what we originally desired, we have to like go through these challenges and obstacles to become the person, to grow into the person that then gets the things that we ultimately wanted effortlessly. And then the law of familiarity kicks into place, and it's the whole cycle over again. And that's just growth until, inevitably we shuffle off this mortal plane, and who knows what's next. But it's really interesting to think that that same thing you just described as being so stressful and, oh my God, I want to push away, is literally the thing that might ultimately cause you to succeed versus fail.
There's this leadership quote that I love, which I hope I can get exactly right, but also that you'll forgive me if I also get
Imposter.
intentionally. It's a word medicine. It says being a true leader is as simple as becoming oneself. It is precisely that easy, and it's precisely that difficult.
Yeah.
Right? It's like what
And
a
a leader creates more leaders, not more followers.
yeah,
Please, please, and thank
yeah.
you, everybody.
Yeah, the way that we define leadership, that's like literally the first thing we do in our workshops, right? We say we're unlocking leadership potential. And the first thing we do is just like completely break the definition of leadership that most people in Rwanda, especially, that's a super hierarchical society. Um, we say leadership is literally, it is being proactive in the face of a challenge. That is what it means to be a leader. Like if there is a problem in your life, you solve it. So you walk into a room of women in rural Rwanda and say, how many people in here are leaders? Like you might get a couple hands. If you walk in and say, how many of you have overcome a challenge? They're like, I've got one for every day of my
Yes.
life. Which one would you like to hear? And then when you reframe that as like, that's what it means to be a leader, they're like, oh man, I should stand up a little taller,
Right?
like,
It's 2 millimeter
um,
shift.
yeah, yeah.
This great quote comes to mind. A speaking coach of mine says, people will respect you for your successes, but they'll love you for your failures. Because
Mm,
not everybody can relate to success, but everybody can relate to failing.
yeah.
And that's the kind of that key part of the hero's journey or heroine's journey, or some successful person's journey that we should talk about is how do you speak for leadership? How do you have that impact through your story that allows you to move the masses? And it starts with one, right? It starts with the story you tell yourself, and then one to one, me to you to me, and then us to many, right? So if somebody wants to be a leader, if somebody's inspired, or wants to take that impetus, if we're creating some eustress within them to step up and be a leader, hint 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 hint, snap my fingers, NLP, whatever, where would they start? Like, what are the things they could learn or do to take imperfect action and lots of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think just like lowering the barrier of, what it means, like taking action is of any kind. And that's, one of the reasons too why we've really made this shift from it doesn't mean necessarily national change. Like, and we're also pushed in the sort of like social enterprise, nonprofit social impact world. There's this emphasis on like, what's your one outcome? um, what's the one thing that you're improving? And we have a lot of things that we see change, but what we're really stick to when we try to change the conversation around is, well, we want the women that we work with to make the changes that they want to see in their lives and communities, because how could we possibly know what's best for them? And for what that looks like in terms of output is, for some people that does mean starting a business, and for other people it means having a conversation with their husband and saying, I don't care if she's a girl, I want my youngest child to go to school.
Mhm.
And that's those changes are equally important as far as I'm concerned. And one of them might have a different type of more countable change. But who knows who that little girl is going to grow up to be? And she then has a role model of a woman who stands up for herself. So I think really this idea that we're trying to distill everything down to, well, as the development community, what should we decide is the most important way to reduce poverty? These women know. They know what needs to be done to make their lives be what they want them to be. They just need the courage to do it and the resources to go alongside that. So I
Yeah,
think any action is, any action.
yeah, it kind of reminds me of two things. Is like man plans, God laughs. Or what do we know, right? Honestly, like what are we going to go to another country that we have no experience in and be like, oh, this is how you should live your lives? That's worked out super well,
Sure.
for countries all over the world with the imperial economics that we've practiced. But the other thing to consider is that there is no one right answer. There is no one right outcome, and by getting so hung up on what the outcome should be or must be or could be, we kind of eliminate the possibilities that come from trying to not connect the dots, but just again taking imperfect action toward with an intention versus it has to be this way, and not being so hung up. It's like this enthusiastic intention without
Mm,
being so hung up on what actually comes out, and what comes out of it may be better than ever we could have imagined. And that's certainly a possibility. And then we can
yeah.
consistently refine it from there. It's not like it's the end of the show.
Yeah, we recently finished a 3-year strategic planning process, and our facilitators had something which I loved, which was planning is everything and plans are nothing.
I like that. And life is what happens when you're making plans.
Yeah.
Just ask any parents, right? They're like, well, I had these plans of doing this thing, and then you came along and it was
I know my
amazing.
mom will not let me forget that she was going to go to India. Okay, I'm sorry, mom.
Yeah, exactly. But I think she turned out pretty well. So,
Yeah.
lighting a candle and the ripple effects and the domino effects that go on forever. I mean, some people's purpose in life is to have children that go on to do great things and
Mhm.
just support and nourish and love those children as much as they possibly can. And I can point to that in my own life. My dad stuck around for an extra 15 years. He wouldn't have lived because I needed to be raised.
Mm.
And very shortly after we got into a fist fight and I had to leave home at 16, he spiraled and killed himself with alcohol. And I think he would have done that a lot sooner if it wasn't for me. He was never
Mm.
a happy-go-lucky kind of guy all the time. He was a very smart, intelligent, crippled, man who had a lot of problems. And I loved him, and he had both sides of this. He loved people and he loved life, but at the same time, he wasn't equipped to deal with his own
Mhm.
demons in a way that
Mhm.
was sustainable. So I wonder, like, is my purpose, and completely putting my ego aside for a minute, is my purpose or was his purpose just to make sure that I got to a place where I could take care of myself?
Yeah, he was able to put those aside to the extent that you needed him.
Yeah. And I'm
Yeah.
grateful because like he set me up with a heck of a life and I'm grateful for every minute of it. I'm just trying to live the crap out of it now,
Yeah,
and
and
do
you're
as
not
much good
just
as I
though,
can.
you're also trying to connect other people to the resources and the things that they need to be successful.
That sounds like an acronym. We should make one up. Let's call it C.R.O.P.S. Connect resources, opportunities, people, and systems together.
Uh-huh.
We can make
Yeah,
that so.
crops, because then we can have some sort of clever image that's something, like looks like a growing seed.
Yeah, we can use that to
Like
make more marbles.
we
If
make
you got
more
nothing else
acronyms,
going on. Yeah.
marble.
If in case you like alliteration and black and white animals and pina coladas getting caught in the rain, we got all that stuff going on. But it starts with the seeds, right? It starts with seeking in every encounter to diagnose, create space, serve, support, and solve in that order, because you can't really get to the heart of the problem until you create space for it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
People
And
need to
and
feel
part of
seen and heard before you can solve their problem.
yep. Yep. And people can have all the skills they need. They can have all the resources they need. It can all be right in front of them. But if they don't believe that they're the right person to do it, they won't. They won't.
If only we could convince the world that taking lots of imperfect action was the only way to win. Like if we could just kill the disease of perfectionism and realize that now is perfect at all times and
Brett,
now is
are you a
perfect.
recovering perfectionist? I'm a recovering perfectionist. Are
Oh,
you?
for sure. I'm still like a little bit ADD. Luckily, I also thrive in non-aesthetic environments. Like if you ever take Disc or StrengthsFinder, like aesthetics for me are like super not important. So like I can kind of be and live and do whatever I want anywhere, and it doesn't bother me that the world is coming apart around me. Like some people need to have every paperclip in order to make life
Right.
happen, and I'm like I'm
Sure.
good,
Yeah.
right? I can kind of like thrive anywhere. Ideally, I have a good environment, but at the same time, I can kind of make it work. But I'm wondering, like, as a recovering perfectionist, what are some of the things that you used to do that gave you comfort or certainty that you no longer do?
Man, well, I would say maybe I do to a lesser degree. I wouldn't claim to have completely eliminated it, but this idea of over preparing. I mean, I wasted so much time like going over and back over things that I knew just to make sure that I knew them. Um, and honestly, I think at some point there's diminishing returns there. Like you're making yourself
Yeah.
worse because you're second guessing things.
Well, how about this? Put this on the side. I'm 32, and you're however old you are. I'll never ask, but you've been
I just
training
turned
for that many years. You've been training your entire life for this moment. This moment
yeah.
you're exactly ready for because you're exactly who you need to be, and you just you get to be able to trust. You get to be
Mm,
able to trust that whatever you have right now is exactly what you need inside of you to make what you need happen at the highest level. If you just believe it, you can access that resource. And the function of humans is so funny. It's like what we believe becomes real. We are literally co-creating our reality at all times. So
mm.
just by believing that you have what you need in any circumstance, it shows up.
Yeah, I mean, yes. And then I also want to be super cognizant of the fact that we're like, especially in the work that we're doing, we're working in areas where there's some amount of creativity and there's some amount to which people like straight up need education,
Sure.
loans, food. But you can have all the things and then have them in front of you, but not within reach.
Yeah.
So I
And
think
you're
that's where that
super
connection comes
resourceful,
in.
which is something that you have that you need to do that work.
Totally.
Right.
Totally.
And I've come up against a lot of roadblocks in my life. I'm sure you have too. But as Ryan Holiday would say in his book, Obstacles Away, what is the impediment to action advances action. What
Mm,
stands in the way becomes the way.
mm-hmm.
And it's sometimes these little detours you have to take that give you the tools that you need to ultimately achieve the thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm just grateful that there's people out there in the world that are getting together and connecting the dots and making it work, right? Because that's what we're here to do, I believe.
Yeah. It's what we're good at too, you know, as social creatures, as social beings, is making connections. It's what our brains do all the time. And sometimes I worry we don't externalize that quite enough.
Hmm.
People are they're making the connections inside their heads, but they're not always making them outside. For fear of what I'm not totally sure. I mean, maybe it's ego, um, maybe it's being afraid you'll get it wrong. But you know, especially if you talk about making good in the world, doing good in the world, I think that there's a lack of people trying to say, hey, what you're doing is cool, let me help, or
Hmm.
let me connect you to someone, or, you know, and I say this with a fully conscious that I started an organization, but sometimes when people come to me and they ask me for advice, like, hey, I'm thinking of starting something, what do you think? I say, like, are you sure it doesn't exist? And is there a way that you know, if you're starting something just for the sake of starting something and not because there's a problem in the world that you must solve and there's no one else doing it, like, we're diverting resources, and like smart humans who care is the most important resource. So I think that we've just been sort of become like obsessed a little bit with this idea of entrepreneurship. in the US, but also I see it all over East Africa too. And yes, it's important. Yes, we need to create jobs, we need to create new solutions, but we also need to find solutions that are working and co-create those.
Mm.
And that means also connecting with each other and connecting other people to good ideas. And I really appreciate that when I see that. A friend of mine, George Schroer, who was on your podcast recently,
Yeah, George is a great
yeah,
interview. Yeah.
so he did the podcast, and he said, I think, like, here's two people that I think would be interested in and good at this, and he didn't have to do that, but he's just the type of person who, like, he wants to connect and equip people with resources. And I feel like that's something that I try to do. And when I see, his ability to do it is phenomenal, and it inspires me to do it more. So I like appreciate that in people.
What a brilliant data scientist George is. I can't get over how on point he was with his numbers. I was like, I'm just going to pick your brain for an hour. This is amazing because I'm not a numbers guy. And even though I ran a hedge fund, it was all my team, I promise. Made it work. But yeah, I do agree with that. And that's really near and dear to my heart. And that's the whole kind of core of my message. Like, how do we get together to make more for everybody?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we can only have so much if we focus on ourselves. And it kind of points to your other idea is like the idea piece. Like, so many people are hung up on, I got to start the thing, because it's really their ego, right? That's saying, I need to be the head of this or the face of this. But if you've ever actually created something, it's like pushing a boulder up a hill for many years. And sometimes people help and sometimes people don't. And sometimes you're the only person who get it and you can't even articulate it in a way that makes sense. It took me 4 years to get the Make More Marbles message to a point where I could turn it into a video that people like get it, where they watch the video and it's over and I don't have to explain it anymore. And that took so long to get to that point. And if I had an impact storyteller like yourself, that really understood the hero's journey and the way to really connect it to the things that already people care about, I would have been so much further along. So just looking back and just not knowing how hard it was going to be, I think it's really easy to say, oh, I'm going to start something, as opposed to just getting in the flow that somebody else has already created and scaling the solution that is already working to more people, right? All the ideas, the future is already here, guys. Let's just not evenly distributed. Let's distribute it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm like always very, very inspired. So actually a great example of this is I was recently in this really fantastic program called the GSBI, the Global Social Benefit Institute, through the Miller Center in Santa Clara. And in the same cohort, there was like 16 companies in it. And 2 of them were called Hippocampus because one of them was in India. And then this other friend in Mexico saw their model and came to them and said, we like what you're doing with early childhood education. We want to do it in Mexico. And like, now they're doing it in Mexico, and it was just such a cool, like, they didn't need to try to create their own thing. They're like, no, what you're doing is work. We've surveyed the landscape. We think this is going to work. Like, franchise it to us.
Done.
Yeah.
And the best part is you pay a very small amount of money as a back-end royalty and you get all of the stuff worked out, because the most waste comes from trying to figure it out on your own.
Yeah. And that's what we're trying to do with our model is, like, we've done all of the slog. Well, there's probably some slog left to go, but we've done a lot of slog in the last 4 years to figure out how exactly.
Imposter! No, I'm kidding. We don't have everything figured out forever? Are you kidding me?
You hear a voice in my head every time
break your pattern a little bit.
How do we get it to more people, right?
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
And if that means white labeling, fine. That's fine.
Cool.
If that means we just want to get it to more people.
Yeah, and it works. And then the impact, the domino and ripple effects go on forever. It's a beautiful system. It's a beautiful way to think about the world. It's like, what if we could just spend the rest of our lives doing what works and not wasting time and energy and attention and money and all these resources that we have, some of which are renewable and some of which just aren't.
Okay, but hold on though, because then that sounds like you're a recovering perfectionist though. We also need to be okay with doing.
Well, yeah, what the definition of a waste is too, I guess, is really the key question there. Like, is it wasted time if you enjoyed it? Of course not, right?
Sure.
That's what we're here to do, is enjoy time. And I think more and more and more we've been turned into little productivity machines and everything needs to be on all the time. And there's magic in the mess, right? So I totally get that piece. But at the same time, it's like, when we are working towards something, how do we get there further faster without missing the key lessons along the way that actually allow us to grow? So efficiency for efficiency's sake maybe is an end result of suffering and misery. But then again, sometimes you want to live also in addition to your mission or your work, whatever that
Yeah,
means to you.
yeah, no, I think that's yeah. I think being able to do everything you do with peace of mind is, I mean, it's a goal, right? I think that's aspirational. There's that little bug inside of us that makes us want to do more and want to do better. But I actually think that that's one of the really important reasons that rituals exist in human cultures all over the world in totally different forms. But the act of reflecting on our lives and what we've done and what we've accomplished, and we often don't, I mean, I know this about myself, is that as soon as I achieve something, I move the goalpost. So yeah, you know, I did the strengths finder thing. My number one thing is activator, which my whole
Yeah.
team, yeah, of course you are, like, I want everything done yesterday, you know. I just like, let's go.
My first one is relator. Self-assured is on there somewhere too. I'm so modest. I'm just so modest.
But I mean, it's a like this idea of just like constant efficiency, but then also, you know, I completely lost my train of thought. I don't even know where I'm going with that.
Oh, that
Um,
happens. Yeah. So that's because you're an imposter. No, I'm just kidding. I have this like really like fourth wall breaking, pattern breaking podcasting style that kind of throws people for a loop sometimes. So you wouldn't be the first or the last. I'm getting better, but
well,
I'm still not there
I'm
yet.
glad that I'm in an illustrious line of thought train losers.
Brad Hart, confusing people since 1985. Okay, so let's switch gears just for a second. Let's talk about what it is your mission is now, how people can connect with that mission, and then ultimately how we can connect you to the resources, opportunities, people, and systems that can help you move your mission forward faster because you're on the Make More Marble show. So we got to help you out.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're at like a super fun and interesting time right now, as I said, right? So our mission is to empower women and girls to unlock leadership potential. We do that through delivering leadership training and partnering with groups that are doing complementary skill building and education programs. So we're really collaborative in that respect. So, you know, looking for organizations that do have a really good, strong skill building, vocational entrepreneurship, financial program that could use a leadership component in order to increase the skill adoption of their programs. So we found our programs really have a dual impact. They you know, through the partners we work with, make the women and girls that they serve more able to adopt the entrepreneurship skills, vocational skills, education, so that they can turn opportunity into action. But as a result, we're also making our clients for these other NGOs more effective. Um, and we've gotten to a point where we've you know, done some research on it. We've seen, you know, our 3-day training leads to a 43% increase in income, 30% increase in self-efficacy, 25% increase in women taking on leadership roles. And now we need to figure out a way to make this, get it to more people, but without compromising the quality for scale. So we're super interested right now. You know, we have a couple of different areas that we're looking. First of all, we want to hire really smart people. So we have 2 open positions right now. But we also, you know, need people who can be mentors and advisors and board members and people who have experience with you know, taking a service delivery and scaling that. And then, you know, we are a nonprofit social enterprise. So if people want to help us bring this monetarily to the next level, that's also something that's always super important. But ultimately, we've found that people who are invested in understand this idea that it's not just access to services and skills that's stopping women and girls from reaching their full potential, but there is this core confidence, leadership, belief in themselves. People who really buy that, those are the people that we want to be connecting with. And usually, because of our collaborative approach, we can find a way to integrate them. So we are starting to recruit US-based ambassadors. So if you're someone who's in the US and you love this mission and you're not going to go move to Rwanda, that's totally fine. So how can we galvanize networks of support within the U.S. And how do we also, you know, make communities exist here as well?
Yeah, and I mean, I know a lot of people would love to move to Rwanda, but I think, San Diego is pretty nice too.
Yeah.
Just gonna just gonna go with it. The Hotel California versus Hotel Rwanda, maybe, just here. That's a horrible joke. I'm sorry. We're gonna edit that out. But wow.
Edit.
Anyway,
Beautiful.
sometimes I just say things. I don't actually think them through. But yeah, okay. So if people want to get involved, they can obviously donate, right? They can help you out with your mission. They can become ambassadors here in the U.S. and spread the message. I have somebody perfect for that I'm going to connect you with.
Great.
And then additionally, if there are curriculums that just need a leadership component, then you can plug right in, which is pretty
Yep.
cool,
Yep.
right? Okay, great. And then how do people get in touch with you?
Yeah. So I'm very accessible on the internet. So I'd be happy to have people. Our website, resonateworkshops.org. It has a sign up if you want to get our newsletter. We send a newsletter. You can follow us on social media, on Twitter, on Facebook. We're at our workshops on Twitter. And my personal email is Ayla, AYLA, at resonateworkshops.org. And the secret is that if you send the info at resonateworkshops.org, I'll also see it.
Awesome. Ayla, thank you so much for being on the show today and sharing your mission and sharing your gifts with the people and just being a super fun guest. I mean, you've been awesome. And
Thank you
I'm so
so much.
grateful to George for connecting us. And I want to connect you to some people. I'm thinking Mitch Russo is one. My friend Katie Ward, who's an impact storyteller here in the States, she could possibly get involved with this
Great.
mission. And then also Jenny and Mandy over at Greatness Foundation. I think that would be rad. And you already know Bijia. Tell her I say hi next time you
Will
talk to
do.
her. And yeah, all my best, everything you guys got going on. I'm just going to keep talking about how great you are to everybody and see what comes of it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And also thanks for your patience with me. In
Oh,
my
my pleasure. Yeah, on behalf of everybody at Make More Marbles, thank you for being here, for being so wonderful, so gracious, and giving us a little bit more insight into what you do and how it affects the world, and just your positive vibes and energy. I mean, that's really what the world needs more of, is less doom and gloom and more of what you're doing. And I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thanks so much for listening to the Make More Marbles podcast. For more tips, hacks, and strategies to create an amazing, abundant life in your health, wealth, and relationships, whatever that means to you, head on over to makemoremarbles.com. Check out our cool explainer video about what we're about and join our community of entrepreneurial game changers. We want to help you level up your life in every possible way. And don't forget to subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Play, wherever you listen to your podcasts, and please do leave a review. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next podcast.